Hey, everybody, thank you for joining us. Today I'm going to tell you another exciting story. Enjoy the show, everyone. Let's imagine that one day all records of human civilization disappeared without a trace. Whether it's history, technology, or art, completely. From books to digital data, all the knowledge and records accumulated by the human race vanished overnight. When, for reasons unknown to anyone, society was thrown into chaos and on the verge of collapse. But the situation is not as sad as it looks at first glance. After all, a savior has come to the aid of mankind. And it is nothing but the so-called Zeus system. However, by whom and when it was created, still remains a mystery. And this same system, Zeus, in turn, created a virtual game called Olympus. But in fact, this game was not simple at first glance, because thanks to the abilities available, the Zeus system is able to materialize objects from the game into reality. As a result, Olympus becomes a means of maintaining modern civilization, and soon the line between reality and Olympus was blurred. It's been about 200 years since the world became a place where any object in the game can be materialized in reality. As a consequence, the modern era has evolved into a thriving civilization. Sounds sweet, doesn't it? However, the prosperous civilization wasn't so good. In this world, people were divided into only two classes, where rich people allowed themselves to bully poor people. Collectively, this was called spoon class theory. Because of rankings, the division of spheres of influence, and the appearance of items in the game Olympus, there was a polarization of wealth, and the class system, which in fact was not, once again spread everywhere in society. In this world, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. A world where it is impossible to be born a hero in the gutter. A world where it is difficult for a clay spoon to turn into a golden spoon. Now, let's meet our protagonist, Han Ju-hyuk. This kid was one of the clay spoons in society. So to put it mildly, he was a man from a low society, and he seems to know that there's no law that says the lowly must die. One day, when the kid was 10 years old, he was kidnapped by a crazy old man, who told the kid the opposite, that Han wasn't born with a damn clay spoon in his mouth, but with a gap in his levels and abilities. And that's why our kid has spent the last 20 years going through a hell of a lot of training in the training zone. Allegedly, he was supposed to become the ultimate evil or something like that in the future. And so, along with Saint, Assassin, and Queen of the Dead, the kid decides to become absolute evil. Even then, 20 years ago, after the revolution of Olympus, mankind began to receive education in virtual reality. With the help of it, students raise their level in the Academy of Olympus. And after graduation, they get a job in the Olympus Union and earn money for a living. Even back then, Han was already level 6. Such a future was the norm for everyone, so Han decided to follow this path from a young age. It was a normal sunny day. The boy followed the same road to the academy as always. It was on this day that trouble crept up on him. In one of the trees on the street, sat the same old man who had stolen the boy. The old man grabs Han and flees in an unknown direction. The old man had been looking for a gifted child for a long time, and it was Han who had the talent. But at that moment, Han didn't know it yet. The old man was overjoyed, for he had found the one from whom he would raise and create the strongest men in the world. Han looked at the old man and saw that this strange old man was the embodiment of strength. And that was why, even if forced, Han did not mind becoming his apprentice. And from that moment on, the kid's life changed dramatically. Now every day of Han's life began with a hard, painful, hellish workout. Through tears, Han did the horse stance. For 12 hours, the kid sat in a half crouch, arms outstretched, holding a pyramid of stones on his head, shoulders, and legs. He had to eat special medicine from his mentor in the form of worms, without being able to even move, as he was tied with a rope. The most interesting part was the survival training, when Khan had to run away from a pack of wild hyenas. On an autumn afternoon, Han and his mentor were having another training session. Han was having an argument with his mentor. The argument was that Han, according to some rumors, thought that the best player now had a level 89, and he admired such a level. Objecting to his boy, Arthur, as his mentor liked to call him, said that the best could not be better than level 99. Seeing the further argument, Han was sure of it, as this player was officially considered number 1 and there was no one higher than him. The mentor, giving him a sly look and fixing his gray beard, called the boy a scoundrel. As Han doubts his mentor's words, the mentor gives him some advice that Han should not believe what he sees. The boy should realize that there are many things that are not openly shown in the world. Han didn't like the old man's moralizing very much. It seemed to him that he was always talking the ravings of a madman. The old man asked the boy to believe in him, because the old man was the one who would make the boy the strongest man in the world. The old man was the strongest man in the world, but he did not come from a wealthy family and did not have any items in his arsenal. Han manages to make the old man mad by talking to him, and he beats him on the head in order to educate him. The mentor emphasized that only the level and characteristics are important. As Han did not calm down and continued to argue, the mentor ordered him to stand in that position for 3 more hours as a preventive measure. With tears in his eyes, Han struggled in his head with the thought of whether he could trust this old man. This is how they lived during the training period. Han's torment continued from day to day. Nevertheless, time passed without stopping. Spring replaced winter, fall replaced summer, and 20 years of hellish training flew by in an endless succession of changing seasons. On one of Han's final days, his mentor summarized the results of his training. He admired the boy, for he had managed to do a superb job on himself. The old man had taught him everything he knew, and now he could retire in peace. Closing his eyes and squeezing out a pitiful tear, Han recalled the moments of how incredibly hard it had been for him. He jokingly wished his mentor would die as soon as possible. After all, in reality, the kid was treated like a job seeker who couldn't get a job for 1,000 years and led an irresponsible life. But in the game Olympus, everything was the opposite. Han was forced to devote all his free time to endless training. To put it simply, for 20 years Han had been getting whipped by his mentor. Admitting to himself, the boy still did not understand why despite everything he continued to endure it all, although he had the opportunity to take and delete his character from the game. But there was a silver lining in all of this. He was able to endure the ordeal. Sitting on his knees in front of his mentor, the kid raises his head and addresses his mentor. The kid wondered if the mentor thought the same way he did. Han, after so many years of being with his mentor more than his own family, considers him his father. In such a warm conversation, Han drops a tear again. He was unsure of himself, unsure if he could survive in such a harsh and cruel world without his mentor's protection. The boy still needed his guidance. After listening to him, the mentor was sure the lad was wrong in his guesses. The mentor knew that although Han was weaker than him, his strength had increased significantly after so many years of training. In turn, Han was shedding tears, but in his heart he was eager for his mentor to give him his first quest. As he bowed to him, Han asked his mentor to continue teaching him. As he bowed, Han said one thing, but thought something else. He wanted to get the quest as long as the old man would give it to him before he played the box. You can see that the mentor really cared about this kid. He sincerely asked him that Han did not forget that he was the only student and receiver of the martial art. The old man gives him a map with a marked place. That was his first quest. The mentor has implied that Han's future lies in this place. Han is finally getting what he has been waiting for. The boy expresses great gratitude to his mentor for his generous teachings. As he falls to the ground, he can't stop thanking him. Overnight, the mentor started making some sounds, his eyes lit up and his hair stood up. A strong current of wind was blowing, and the mentor's body was glowing with a strange radiance. A voice came before Han. It didn't sound like the mentor's voice. It looked like it was the old man's last words. He was telling him goodbye, that the world would fall before him, wishing him a good journey and that he should conquer the world. After these words, there was complete silence. In an instant, everything disappeared, and even the candle beside him was no longer burning. When Han got up from his knees, he saw that his mentor's spirit had left his body. The boy came to the gate of the line special zone. With the words that his hellish life was finally over, Han opened the status window. Han Ju remembered that his mentor had almost been beaten to death a couple times after his failed escape attempts. But even after so much agonizing training, he was happy to see his great results from these absurd workouts. One of the stats made the guy wonder why his luck was on the minus side. A notification popped up that Han had passed identification. Then came another notification from the system that the curse of duress had been lifted and Han was relieved of his successor duties. The last alerts were that the special barrier had been cancelled, and that Han could safely leave the special zone line. The guy says he's been waiting for this moment for 20 years. He finally decided to give a farewell speech before leaving the area. He talked about how he can now say goodbye to Line forever and let his new life welcome him sooner rather than later. As soon as Han wanted to leave the area, the system alerted him that an error had been detected. The guy was shocked and didn't understand what was happening. The system alerted that it had detected an abnormal level increase and that the guy had not gone through the upgrade procedure. Suddenly, Han Ju Hyok's status window opened on its own, and the system began to say that by the power of Zeus, it would reset all of his abnormal levels. Before Han could even think about it, his level from 99 began to drop lower and lower. He prayed that it would stop, because he had worked hard to obtain this 99th level. When the level dropped to 1, the system alerted that the operation had been successful. Han fell to his knees while he was being notified that his stress level was too high and continued access would be detrimental to his health, and if the high stress level continued, an automatic logout would be performed. After a while, Han lay on the ground and mourned what had just happened and that his 20 years had just been wasted. Opening the status window, he made sure it wasn't a dream, As soon as he wanted to say something, he noticed that only the level had reset but not all his stats. The guy jumped at this news, and surprised he remembered that there would obviously be penalties for level drops. As a rule, a skill was banned, and even the most basic of his skills, Heaven-Conquering Mind Technique, required at least level 40 to be used. He also can't use any of his attack skills, and wearing restricted items isn't possible either. The guy is literally level 1. Han laughed at what the hell he was doing with all these restrictions. Because in other words, level 1 was the easiest state to climb up. He could quickly level up and invest in stats again, destroying monsters with the remaining stats. In fact, his terms are extremely favorable to him now that his life as a job seeker is over. The first thing he did was to go to the newcomer's starting town. Using the scroll of return, he traveled to Urka's. When he teleported, he said that from that moment on he would start living his own, real life. After teleporting, he found himself in the town square for the first time in 20 years, talking about how much he missed the square, the street vendors, and the beautiful atmosphere in the town. He decided to head to the hunting grounds. When he arrived at the western gate, he was stopped by a guard who asked Han Ju what level he was at, and he easily answered the first level. The guard says that it looks like he has the wrong gate and he needs to go to the east gate, but here it's the west gate. The guard also warns Han that this is a dangerous place for a level 1. The boy enthusiastically asks if this place is a forbidden zone, to which he gets the answer that it is not, but the man strongly advises him not to go there with that level. The guardian warned him that he wouldn't even be able to overpower a toothy rabbit with his first level. This seemingly fluffy and cute animal has big fangs and is level 5. The guard advises him to come back later, as soon as Han raises his level, but the boy doesn't listen to him and rushes forward, thinking that he can do it. The guardian is offended that he didn't listen to him. While walking down the path, Han sees a lot of rabbits on the lawn. Guardian Alert quest activated. Na, the guardian of the western gate of Urka's, who observes the player with suspicion, Na speculates that the player may be dead. Khan must dispel Na's alarm and then he can get 30,000 gold. Khan saw the guard's excitement, but in fact the guard was unaware of the quest that Khan had received from his mentor. The guard's jaw dropped and his eyes lit up with a question of what Han was up to as he waved his hand around. While Han was trying to get the guard's attention, as a small and cute animal, a level 5 rabbit, appeared behind his back. This cute little beast attacks Han, and in fact it turned out to be exactly as the guard told him. The rabbit's teeth were really big. The guard quickly rushes out of his seat to help the kid. Han stood still, without a shred of fear on his face, smiling over the fluffy rabbit. He was confident that he could handle it. Taking aim, Han, with a single punch of his fist, delivers a mighty blow to the furry beast's furry belly area. After the rabbit flies off to an unknown direction, Han receives 1 gold and plus experience for this furry duel. Looking at his manicure, Han is rubbing himself with his skill. The guard watches in a stupor as Han stands still and scatters a whole flock of rabbits around without moving. From the look in his eyes, he was clearly seeing such a scene for the first time in his life. The guardian, in a surprised voice, is trying to find out what his secret is. After what he saw, he clearly began to doubt Han's level 1 status. Han scratched the back of his head and insisted that he had told him the truth about level 1. Han doubted that the guard only had to keep track of the level. It was hard for the guards to believe what they had seen, and Han's fighting technique wasn't even level 1. Han, happily speaking, never admitted it, saying it was a big secret. Well, while they were chatting nicely, Han's next test was coming up. Hearing a grunt behind him and seeing the frightened face of the guard, Han turns his head back. It was the thug of the western gate, a rabid boar. The guard asks Han to step aside, as he was sure it was certainly not for his level. Han, completely calm, waves his hand at the guard and goes to meet the boar. Before the guard can fully protect Han, the boy takes out the wild boar with a single blow, at full bark. With another victory, Han gets another level. The guardian watched as the boy danced merrily, celebrating his first successes. The guardian didn't really believe the kid was a beginner, for a moment thinking he was just dreaming and it wasn't real. Han is enjoying a clean and not difficult victory, reading the notifications on the screen, where it clearly stated that the quest, Alarm the Guardian of Nera, was completed. Han, as a pure reward, receives 30,000 gold, and that was all for just a few hits. After all, 1 gold in the game equaled 1 in the real world. Han has given some thought to his income and whether his income can be invested in his characteristics. For now, he decides to leave it for later. With a cheerful face, he waves to the guard and goes on his way. The guard remains at his post, and Han, in full moral satisfaction, walks briskly and accompanied by good weather to the high-level hunting grounds. While Han was merrily walking down the path, for that time he thought that the path of his life was perfectly easy and straight, thought it was his reward for 20 years of hard work, and his future would be smooth and even. But a few cheerful days later, Han had been involved in various incidents in a short period of time, and now he was full of confusion as to what was even going on. The notification list said that he was taking part in a murder. The How system is activated and he gets the assassin tag. Other NPCs attacked out of nowhere, all of them wanting him dead. Each of them mistook Han for a wanted criminal. Hiding around a corner, there was a notice on the wall with a picture of the criminal, and supposedly it was him in the picture. Khan didn't understand why he was being punished like this. After all, how could he be mistaken for someone who only looked a little like him? Han tries to find the answer in the system. Maybe it was his bad luck, in his own level. Under that influence, all the NPCs thought Han was a criminal. And while he was searching for an answer, standing near the announcement, the next attacker was already flying towards him. While he was distracted by his thoughts, the next do-gooder was already at his back. For Han, this one wasn't a threat to his life either. The boy notices him, and with a U-turn, he takes down his attacker with a single blow. Raising his fist up, Han enjoyed his reflexes and strength. He was saving his life so he wouldn't die. The boy was not yet able to control his punching power, as he would immediately send his attackers to the other side of the world. But in the game Olympus, there was a rule that if a player commits a crime, the system, How, registers him as a criminal. Han, thanks to his bad luck in another kill, gets notified by the system that he has entered full How mode. And only thanks to his bad luck, the kid manages to earn all kinds of penalties. After such a system of penalties, he begins to be chased not only by NPCs, but also by other players. In such a situation in which Han found himself, there can only be one reason. All those who were chasing his life were sure that Han was the serial killer Getrock. Unfortunately, while running away from them, Khan couldn't stop to prove to them that he wasn't. He himself was tormented by the same question, who is Getrock? According to the hero system, which is the opposite of the How system, you can become a hero by killing a Howist. And Han, at this point, was just that. And of course, he becomes a full How target for players who want to become heroes. As Han ran from the pursuit, he didn't notice how he found himself driven into a dead end. The players who were chasing him suggest that he surrender. But this was the easiest option for Han and not favorable for him. Having gained his strength, Khan blows up the place where he was with the other players. In order to survive, the boy had no choice but to kill all the players chasing him in one fell swoop. He stood and watched all the bodies disappear. Watching all this, our hero decides to lie low so that he will not be found. But thanks to his killing, the kid still gets from it, increasing his level. A couple of weeks pass after the kid makes the decision to disappear from sight. While in some woods, Han sat on a rock in complete contemplation. It seems that normal players aren't fixable. Checking his status, Han saw that it was even after 2 weeks, unchanged. There was still the same full house status. Han thought that he would have to hide for at least a year for this full house status to disappear. Leaning back from his sad thoughts, he made the decision to stop being a hero. Anyway, since he was becoming a bad guy, he shouldn't move away from eating well and living well. Han knew that with his level 99 characteristics, he would have no problem eating well and living well. Although to him, it was strange that after 20 years of hellish torture, he was being put into full How mode, because it should have been the other way around. It seemed to him that he had been deliberately put into this mode. Perhaps this scenario was his mentor's intention. He wondered what was behind all of this. Because as soon as he got rid of the pain of the past, a new pain came to him. The whole mess of thoughts in his head kept him on his toes. And of course Han didn't know that the answers to his questions would come to him much sooner than he had expected. The next day, as Han followed his path, he came upon a group of men, 6 of whom were dressed exactly alike. One of them was completely in white. From the outside, it looked like he was the most important among them. They were all kneeling before him. The one who was at the head of the group rejoiced at this meeting, for they had met the receiver of the Absolute. The old men praised the boy as if God himself were in front of them. At the same time, they prayed to the Heavenly Devil Absolute. Han looked at the message with astonishment. He saw a new class of quest, SSS, in front of him. This quest was the highest level that had existed in the game for the past 200 years. It was so rare that in the entire history of the game, this quest had only appeared 3 times. But every time this quest appeared, there was a cataclysm on Olympus. Such quests have always been held only at the national level. Han concludes that the training that had been his personal hell for 20 years and this full How status he had already managed to acquire. The old men who bowed before him as if before a god. This was everything that Han's mentor Zeus had so carefully prepared him for. Han caught himself in the feeling that he was becoming part of a bigger story. The era of chaos and warfare lasted for 7,000 years. After a long war, a peace treaty divided the world into 3 powers. Among them, the most famous, the power of Centinea, had an absolute ruler. His name was Garcia Mentors. Garcia had the largest number of wives, 14 wives. Of those 14 wives, the 7th wife gave birth to Aractus. Aractus at one time, in some region, produced offspring from someone, who in turn gave birth to another. After that, again someone somewhere was born, then another offspring was born. It took Han about 10 minutes to read the data from the genealogy book. He still didn't realize why he needed all that long genealogy and what it was for. And because these old people were so nice, it would probably be rude of Han to skip reading the contents. He decides to continue reading. So, in the course of reading, the kid finds out that a man named Shulter, who was the strongest at the time, had taken over the hegemony. This Shulter inherited devil blood and was far more violent than anyone else. It was also mentioned that he was feared by all the heroes of the world. When the rebellion broke out, Shulter was defeated and trapped, but he was only crippled and life continued to stir in his body. After such a defeat, Shulter settles down in a cave where he regains his former power. Reading all this, Han stumbles another thought in his throat. He thought that his mentor might have been a descendant of this Shulter, or someone of this lineage. Looking at his hand, our hero thought that perhaps, all these 20 years of training, he had been learning the art of combat from Shulter himself. Reading further, Han comes across a surprising message. And now, my dear viewer, I advise you to press pause and read carefully what this message will say. It will make it easier for you to visualize what is happening. While dealing with this situation, Han realized that if the matter took a serious turn, it could result in deletion of the character or, even worse, a complete ban on connection to the game. As he stood up from the log, the boy was angry that he was already in trouble, and the system itself wanted to finish him off. From all this, the boy draws another conclusion, that no matter what the means and methods, no matter what the cost, the main goal must be achieved. He recognizes the fact from what he has read that these old men were elders of the heavenly devil himself. With great delight that Han recognized them, the head elder, with all his might, bangs his head on the ground. Han made a slightly sly smile. After all, those were exactly what his mentor had said. That Han would stand at the head of the heavenly devil elders and restore the former glory of the heavenly devil elders in this continent. As he stood up, the elder could not hold back his tears, even though he had a wound in his forehead from the impact with the ground. As he approached them, Han realized that these 7 elders were the only ones who sympathized with Han. They, in turn, bowed and praised the boy. Khan asked them to stop and better get on their way. Khan's words to the elders were like a pleasant melody to their ears. In the meantime, the chief elder decided to calm Han's further unrest by having them cut off the heads of all the ill-wishers in the district. And then Han immediately answers his own inner question as to why it was so remarkably quiet in the county. Notifications began to come to Han that Han was being given experience for his connection and recognizing the elders. Our hero was a little shocked that he was able to reach the 9th level so quickly and on the bark. But according to the national rule, people could reach the 20th level when they finished their training at the age of 20. Seeing this situation, Han decides to meet the elders. The boy asked the name of the most important elder. The elder in white was called Luxo. The elders represented Han as a lord, so they were eager to answer his questions. The first thing Han confessed was that he was under special restrictions. Even though he had followed his mentor's mantra to the max, the kid couldn't use any of his techniques at the moment. His head remembers everything, but his body can't keep up. And of course the elders knew that something like this had happened to Han. And yet, the lad plucked up courage, for he already thought he was an absolute. He was going to rule the elders and gave them his word that he would take them to a place where they could drown in sunlight. Hearing this, the elders again take to bowing and praising Han. With a smirk, Han saw that this approach worked for them as well, thus raising his level even more. Let's bring you back to reality a little bit. The sound of the machine running. Han is standing on the cuna, sipping syrup from a glass. His enjoyment is interrupted by his little sister's voice. Her name was Han Saya. So, she comes to Han with news. After all, she had heard that their alliance had won a good quest, and she thought that a serial killer named Getrok was operating in the Sentinia border region. Han, of course, pretends as if he's hearing the story for the first time. Sis outlines the killer, that he uses twin pistols and is about level 40. Rumor has it that only a team of 7 can capture him. His sister bragged to her brother that if she could succeed in capturing the assassin, she could receive a reward of 3 million gold coins from the alliance. But that's not what Han had heard, that there was a bounty of over 100 million gold pieces on his head. It's a strange situation. His sister laughs at him and says that the medium and small alliances are always in such a mess and yet their alliance gives the reward more than the others. Han was a little indignant, for the lion's share of the work fell to them, not to the office rats. His sister, teasing him, said that somehow, for this encouragement, she'd be able to buy some meat to take home, because their family has hardly eaten any meat lately. Han says, pointing out the heavily pronounced bags under her brother's eyes. But anyway, Han finishes his dialogue with his sister and leaves to connect to the system. Han enters the system. As soon as he entered the land of the game system, he immediately gets a message from Luxo. It said that someone is following the guy and they have not been able to identify him yet. Our hero at first thinks that he is wanted by his own sister, but on request in the system, he receives a reply that the sister's character is on another continent. While Han was trying to find out through the system who is really looking for him, the same killer appeared behind his back, because of whom they were chasing Han, thinking that it was him. Yes, it was Getrok himself. for he fit in so well with the paired pistols his sister had spoken of. Gethrock had dared to charge that Khan had allowed him to pretend to be him. Gethrock was very eager to pay him back for such an act. Han was very lucky that his sister had time to share important information with him. The kid wasn't much worried, even though he had high stats. Gethrock had level 40. There was a big difference between them in both items and equipment. Han, having completely forgotten about his elders, closes his eyes. He gathers his thoughts that he cannot lose now, in the most important quest of his life. Suddenly, this meditation pushes him to think that he doesn't have to fight it alone. Tooting a second, Luxo appears in front of him, the elder appearing at his first call. Gethrock was surprised at this turn of events, for he had not seen the elder's presence at all. Han knows that the elders will do his bidding, and so Han orders Luxo to destroy the assassin. Hearing Han's order, the elder draws his sword. Gethrock was too sure of his victory, because he saw the old man and the green boy in front of him. The assassin did not wait for them to talk and rushed into battle. Han, for his part, only heard a whistle and a small stream of wind. As if standing in front of him, Luxo vanished into thin air. Gethrock's head flew to the ground before he could even blink an eye. Not even a moment later, Luxo was already hiding his sword. Han was speechless at what he saw, as if he was at a loss for words. He didn't even have time to realize how or what had happened. The kid had a dilemma in front of him because he had heard that Gethrock was level 40. Either Gethrock was too weak or his elder was stronger than Han could imagine. Luxo's speed was so lightning fast that the kid didn't even have time to consider Luxo's footsteps. Kneeling down, Luxo presented Han with the head of Gethrock wrapped in a sack. Han held the head in his hands and counted his level up points. As said, plus levels, Han gets a reward of 100 million gold coins. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. Han is very grateful to Elder Luxo. He had never imagined that an NPC whose head was worth 100 million would be in his hands so easily. After such a fight, Han realized how to proceed, because he saw how easy it was to level up. The kid gave orders to the elders to hunt all living things around him without making a fuss. With such progress, Han was ready to follow any scenario or quest the system would give him, ready to diligently play the role of ruler next. After the recent events, a couple weeks pass. Han strolls through the forest. At the same time, his elder and loyal protector is running around killing everything in his path. Han calmly collected his level ups without any effort. Looking at the screen, Han saw that he was already level 13. While others took several years to level up, Han was raising his level at an unheard of rate. Han is plotting his future plans, because in order to master the heaven-conquering mind technique, he needs to be at least level 40. Once he reaches that level, that will be his real start. The kid's ambitions were off the scale. Already being at such a small level, he was already thinking about creating his own company in the future. But that was just a rumor, but in reality, Han is holding a bag in his hand and thinking about how to get rid of his head. Han returns to his reality. Sitting down at the computer in his room, Han searches for who and where he is buying up expensive items. But it wasn't all that easy at first glance. After reading the comments, Han realizes that he won't be able to sell the expensive item in the real world. All of this could spell disaster for him. While Han was pondering, his little sister came into his room. Han noticed that her sister had come just in time. She thought her brother wanted to borrow some money from her. Han laughed in return, for it was not about pocket money. Han asked his sister what she would do if she got Gethrock's head. The sister didn't understand much of what he meant. The sister laughed at her brother's question. She didn't understand, if her brother had his head, why he would give it to her. After all, he could sell it and eat hamburgers with the proceeds. Han told her in a serious voice that he would get the head and offered to split the proceeds for it in half. Sis was surprised at Han's serious tone, thinking for a second that he was talking nonsense. Seiya's emphasis is on the Gethrock level, and rumor has it she pointed out that Han can't visit the other zone because of training. What kind of head could we be talking about? Sis sensed that her little brother wasn't telling her something. Han decides to take pity on his sister and admits that he managed to catch him a few days ago. Her sister didn't believe her brother's words, as she knew that Gethrock had level 40. She hinted to her brother that his joke was going too far. In between, Han casually tells her that he is level 99 after all. Seeing that his sister didn't quite remember this moment, Han decided to remind her that about 10 years ago, he had sent her a screenshot of him telling her that he had gotten to level 99. But even then, she didn't really believe it, thinking that her brother had used trickery and faked the message. Han is preparing to enter the system, and suggested to his sister that if she still wanted Gethrock's head, she should go to the Leprian Mountains in Sentinia. The coordinates he should send her as soon as he joined the game. She wondered again why her brother wanted to send her there, since she was only level 25. As for that, Han told her that he was currently a Chaosist and was up to his ears in full Hao mode. Seiya, after listening to her brother, enters the game and immediately goes to the gate where the entrance to the Leprius Mountains was. At the gate itself, she meets two guards. At the entrance, she tells the guards that she needs to go to the Leprius Mountains. The guards were reluctant to let her out, as she could die there in a matter of minutes, because there are a lot of monsters climbing there. Saya wasn't really worried about her life, since everyone returns to real life after death anyway. She asked the guards not to worry about her. Well, the guards were powerless in her persistence, and they let her pass. Shouting in her wake, the guards asked that if she did die, that she not blame them for it. 3 hours later, Saya was walking through a forest where there wasn't a soul in sight, and the silence was sepulchral. But such silence was justified, as her brother had told her that he would destroy all the mobs in the forest before she arrived. Saya felt a strange emptiness, as if not only the monsters were destroyed, but also all living things. While Saya was distracted by the silence, her brother appeared out of nowhere. And of course, with his sudden appearance, he scares his little sister badly. Saya let out a tear from fright and yelled at her brother, for she was very frightened. Han could have hinted at his presence in some way. Her sister noticed a strange glow around her brother, and it looked like her brother was telling the truth about being in full Hao mode. Without telling the whole story how it happened, Han actually killed Gethrock while in that mode. Han brings up the system screen. After selecting the desired item, a bag containing Gethrock's head appeared in his hand, which could be exchanged at the reward center, translated with dpel.com, free version. Saya looked at the bag and couldn't believe her eyes. For a second, she thought it was a dream and needed to be pinched immediately. With great joy and a big smile, Saya rushed to her brother for telling her the truth, because she thought it was a prank until the last moment. Her happiness was boundless, her eyes burning as there was a big reward for her head. Notwithstanding her sister's shouts of joy, Han sent her to the exchange office and hinted that if she took the money and ran away, he would kill her, translated with dpel.com, free version. Saya returns to the city and finds the exchange shop. The head of the exchange shop checks and confirms that it is the head of the wanted criminal Gethrock. The quest called Kill Gethrock has been completed, and the head exchange officer brings out her designated reward. Her eyes sparkled with happiness, for the sum was impressive for her age and level. Drooling, she already imagined that if she got half of it, she would definitely buy all kinds of her favorite hamburgers. In her euphoria, Saya remembered what her brother had been going through when he was still training. When she was still a little girl, she and her mom had seen Han not leaving the toilet after training. At the time, she thought he hadn't been eating well in his training. Saya felt a little sad at the memory. She felt sorry for her little brother. Taking the award, Saya moved back to her brother. Realizing the severity of his training and how hard it was for him, Saya returns the 99 million gold to him. When Han took the pouch, he was a little perturbed, for they had agreed to divide the reward equally. She could not afford to take more gold from her brother, for it was the first money he had earned after 20 years of suffering. So she took only 1 million for her own pocket money. She didn't let her brother argue with her decision. Saya took the day off, and while her brother was confused, she went to spend the 1 million. Han smiled sweetly at her back. As Han walked down the path, he calculated how much he had earned in net money, including tax deductions. After doing the calculation, Han realized that he had earned 80 million won in one go. Now he didn't care whether he was a Chaosist or an ordinary hero. After all, even in this status, Han could earn a good amount of money to live on. But in reality, the SSS quest hadn't even started yet, and he already had that much money in his pocket. Now Han can hardly imagine the reward when he completes the main quest. Han is eager to reach level 40 as soon as possible to continue the quest. To do so, he wants to accelerate his growth every second. Han considers his profits not a bad investment for the future. That same afternoon, Han returns home to real life. Upon his return, Han immediately calls his sister and asks her to buy items for him instead. His sister replies that she just got back from work, but Han easily convinces her to help him by telling her that if his business goes up, he'll give her 300,000 won every month for pocket change. Saya raises the bet to 500,000 won, and Ju Hyuk agrees. After a while, Saya was already there and gave all the items to her brother. All the items he acquired with the help of his sister are artifacts that increase experience. All the artifacts cost Han 70 million gold coins, which was 70 million won. The guy was slightly shocked after realizing how much money it had cost. The guy's sister standing behind him asks him to put up a teleportation point if he wants to do his small errand again. Han asks how much such a teleportation point costs and gets the answer that setting up the first teleportation point will cost 3 million gold pieces, then it will take off 300,000 gold coins every time he uses it. Before leaving the system, Saya asked her brother to hide all of his newfound accessories by using invisible mode, since he looked terrible in them. At the same time, while Han activated the invisible mode, he told himself that he would have to earn more money from now on. He summoned the elders and ordered them to move out. When they reached the Jeff Mountains, the guy was walking through the forest, looking around. Behind one of the many trees was a big guy in knight armor, and another guy who said that Han was a Kaosi and it was ideal for an archer to raise his reputation. After examining Ju Hyuk, the gang noticed that he looked weak and his items were basic, so they assumed that he had died many times on the way here. The boss of this gang said that it wasn't certain, but one thing was certain was that he couldn't even detect them, so his field of vision had an extremely small coverage, so they assumed that Han was most likely a rookie. Taking his sword in his hand, the men ordered everyone to prepare to attack the boy. As Han walked through the forest, he noticed that there were no monsters around. The boy was stopped by a message from the system that an outside force was trying to take over his body. Zhu Hek didn't fully understand who was trying to capture him, while at the same moment, the mage from that gang was telling his boss about the binding spell resisting on the guy. The boss assumed that the guy was from a group of priests, but all of his items were mediocre and it seemed like he had already died many times and had lost all of his artifacts a long time ago. The target archer talks about how he only needs to kill one full how to rise to the League of Heroes. The men says to lay off the pointless chatter and get ready for them to take the kid down now. After assigning everyone their roles in the plan, the boss and tank attacked the kid first. Han said they could survive if they went back to their seats, to which the men said it was a lie and then threw a punch, which Han successfully dodged. In a calm voice, Zhu Hek asked them what level they were, but they ignored his question and tried to hit him again. All their attacks were futile as the guy bounced away from them. Noticing the sword, Han said that this great sword was a 40-level sword and would cost about 20 gold pieces. The archer, who was standing a little farther away, said that Han seemed to have prepared for the battle in advance and had come to this place specially. The guy still had his wits about him and decided to attack on his own, but because he can't use his skills right now, he's going to try out his fists. Standing in a fighting stance, the archer told his boss that the guy is preparing some magic and it might be some special magic, so he suggests his boss to back off before the archer shoots an arrow for anti-magic. The system alerted Han that the assassin's full house status was still intact, and the aura of the assassin was getting darker with the sin, which was also aggravated. The system notified Han that the full house status was still intact, and the assassin's aura was getting darker with the sin that had also worsened. Zhu Hyuk is once again attacked by a tank, which the guy easily gets rid of. The system repeats the same words about full how, aura, and sin. The rest of the team, who were in charge of support, were standing around and couldn't figure out what they were supposed to do. Tank tells the guys to run as it's not something they can handle. This idea is supported by the boss also ordering everyone to run. The archer didn't even get a couple of meters away from the guy as he used a leap that only one person can do. A high-level melee player above level 60 is Hunter Rafendel. After killing the entire gang, Han was able to raise his level to 16th. The system notifies the guy that he was able to demonstrate a strong image of a man who does not forgive those who tarnished his honor, as well as the localization of the clan is strengthened and the minimum requirements are confirmed. After these words, Han's characteristic called Charisma opened up, which was now level 10. The guy didn't know what it meant or what it was for, but he didn't mind. Luxo appeared behind Han and had something to say to him, so he asked him to follow him. After agreeing, Zhu Hyuk and the elders reached the Heavenly Devil's Lair. As it turned out, it took them 7 days of trekking, and Han's legs were already falling off. When they reached the village, Han asked himself why they couldn't have opened a portal in the middle of the desert, since they weren't Columbus for such an adventure. Zhu Hek was happy that there was an acceleration point during the hike, but unfortunately it didn't last long, so for the next week they just stomped their feet. There were no animals, no monsters, nothing. So he had to drink only water for a week, but good thing his characteristics were 99 each, but still he was completely exhausted. Luxo calls out to Han, telling him that there is a village ahead of them. The boy was overjoyed at this news, and so he thought his torment was over and he would finally be able to eat, but no such luck. Once they were already in the village, it was all broken and there wasn't a soul on the street. People started coming out of the dilapidated buildings saying that their absolute had finally returned and their savior had come. The system once again notified Han that a small quest called Rebuild the Destroyed Village had been activated. To meet Han came, and the prophet Carls, who was 163 years old. Carls invited Han to a conversation in which he told him about what had happened long ago in that area. He said that Garcia Mentors had raised 12 elders there to hide from the eyes of the Empire. These 12 elders traveled all over the world in search of the descendants of the Absolute, and this area is an environment where there are no monsters or animals. This harsh area where it is difficult to farm, and all this time, the people here have been hiding in poverty, endlessly waiting for Han to come. When Zhu Hek asked if he had understood correctly, the prophet confirmed all of his words. After some thought, the boy asks if it was impossible to bring supplies from outside, to which he gets the answer that it was impossible since all the inhabitants are imprisoned here, including the elders. Nothing can be brought into this area from the outside. After some thought, Han realized that the first thing he had to do was to feed the people. Calling Luxo, Zhu Hek asked him how long the people could survive without him. The elder told him 2 weeks at the most. Standing up and leaving the prophet's tent, Han walked to the cliff overlooking the village and drew everyone's attention to his speech. Zhu Hek began by saying that he understood how hungry and sad they were, but he had been so absorbed in training that he could not take care of them. But that's all changed now, and he swears he'd give his shirt off his back for them. He also says there's enough time before the full moon, so he asks everyone to wait a little longer. The system notifies the guy that the favor of the Heavenly Devil Village's NPCs has increased, and the loyalty has also increased. Han asked Luxo to follow him since the two of them will be faster, but let the other elders stay in the village. Once out of the village, the boy reminds Luxo that they are running out of time, so when they get outside his job is to clear out all the monsters during the trek, and if any mana stones or items appear, have him carry them to Han. Since Ju Hek and Luxo went out hunting, Han was able to prepare all the supplies he needed in an hour on one of the days. The guy says that in order to get back faster he prepared what he could gather faster, and under that value he had a bunch of magic pouches whose contents were as yet unknown. We are shown the events that took place a few days ago. Seiya receives a notification from the system that a whisper has been sent to her. Han takes his sister's attention away for a second and asks her to bring him a magic pouch and 800 cans of porridge. He specified the meeting place, just like last time, the Leprian Mountains. The little sister is surprised by the request, wondering what her brother is up to this time. Han holds out a bag of money to her, telling her not to worry about the money, he will pay for everything. Along with the money, Han gives her a blue stone. He tells her to sell it, and from the proceeds, she should keep 10%. Sis thought her little brother had gotten very lucky. Before the race, Han also asks her to buy him 3 more teleporters. He needed the teleporter to get from the Leprius Mountains, through the Heavenly Devil's lair to the Heavenly Devil's village. Han had managed to drastically reduce the time, otherwise he would have traveled to the village on foot, over a week. Even though the teleport was expensive. A chamber, a candle burning on a table. A 12th elder named Eder sits at the table, full of thought. He couldn't get his head around how he could leave the village, leaving the borders unattended. It was about Luxo. After all, not all elders held a consensus on the Heavenly Devil. Suddenly his gloomy thoughts were interrupted by some noise in the courtyard. He rushed over to see what was going on. He thought that the Absolute had returned to the village. He, as well as the other villagers, saw a pile of cans of food in the courtyard. Along with the cans, Han arrived as well. With a happy face and a big smile on his face, Khan informs the people that he has brought them milk and honey, and he warned them not to eat it all at once, or they might get sick. Eder's eyes bulged with surprise. He had just never seen so much food at one time. The people in the village began to cheer and rejoice that they would finally eat. The people praise the Absolute. Immediately the system gives out to Han that the closeness with the villagers is increasing. The loyalty of the people is taking deep roots. Han asks an elder to share the porridge with Luxo. Eddard stood back and watched the situation. He was not particularly happy about it, for he did not trust Han much. As he entered the tent, Han thought about improving the food, shelter, and clothing in the village. He has a lot of work ahead of him, and he will have to work hard to get the food in. Before he can undress, he has a guest in his tent. Inviting him in, Han sees that Eder has come to visit him. Falling on his knees, Eder begs for mercy for disloyalty to the Lord, to our hero. Just then, the system gives a message that Khan is being recognized by the 12th elder, Eder. It seemed too easy a recognition for Han. Eder admits that he dared to doubt Khan, but recognizes him as the true leader, and that only benefited Khan, because he thought his recognition was a long-term project. This was very good news for him. Han decides to talk to him. Approaching him, he takes him by the shoulders. Han has a frank conversation with him. Eder must know that Han's options are limited for now. Han knows that Eder has little trust in him, which Han thinks is right, because if he were Han, he would do the same. Khan asks Eder to trust him, despite his mistrust, and he will more than repay his faith. Letting a tear fall, Eder once again asks his lord, Khan, for forgiveness. Khan is notified by the system that Elder Eder has been recognized as the perfect follower. As Han listened to Eder's confession, he was already spinning the next plan in his head. Based on the fact that he already had level 19, he decides to test his characteristics. Even though Han remembered Luxo's words that if he moved on, he would arouse the suspicion of the Empire, the boy decides to take Eder, as he has good stealth skills, and head for the Leprian Mountains. Upon arrival in the mountains, they are greeted by a kind and lovable animal. It was a giant bear that was already ready to eat them. It was the first time Khan had seen this bear in these forests. Eder bears his sword and asks Han's permission if he can kill it. Han calmly refuses and decides to try to fight it alone. Han roughly imagined that the giant bear was level 40. This kind of monster is usually caught by a group of 5 or 6 people. This small bear rushes to attack. Han manages to get away from the blow with a jump and ends up on a tree branch. The bear is in a stupor. He didn't see anyone in front of him after the blow. Han, realizing that the giant bear is all alone, leaps down from the tree. Han was so confident in his strength that he thought he could catch him alone, and he punches the bear in the head from above. Well, victory rests with the Lord. One blow was enough for Khan to take down the giant bear. After the victory, Khan gains experience and closes the bear hunt. Eddard marvels at his lord. Han didn't think the fight would be fast. He was bored. Now he didn't realize whether he was so strong or the monsters were so weak. The boy orders Eddard to move on. Their path lies to the dungeon of Amantium. After several days of traveling, Han and Eddard find themselves in a cave where they find the entrance to the dungeon. Eddard notices that there are many footprints in the dungeon. What was the Amantium dungeon hiding? It was a beginner's dungeon located near Urkas, the starting city, and because here you could get upgrade points for passing a level of the appropriate difficulty, this place was just crawling with academy students. And of course the instructors belonging to the Grand Alliance. Han wondered how good the instructors were, if he had put down the bear with one punch. An hour later, Han and Eddard move out to the entrance. The two students talk about how they wanted to clear the dungeon completely, but since this is the second time they've been here, they're still excited. Han appears on the horizon. The two students spot him and quickly try to inform the instructor. The instructor couldn't believe his ears at first that a cowcyst had wandered into their cave. As Han moved through the cave, he pondered that while he had hunted monsters along his journey, he had come to the conclusion that by killing monsters with his own hands, he was not dropping off items. But looking at his characteristics, he could see the reason why, because his luck was at a severe disadvantage. He thought that he could give the last blows to the elders, but he could kill all the monsters with a single blow. While he was thinking of ways to bypass the system, an instructor appeared in his way. Han knew to be careful with them, as his sister had warned him that all instructors were in large alliances, and their levels were in the neighborhood of 40. Of course, the boy hoped that any encounter with them would be a barking match. Faced with him, Han was not very pleased with his rude treatment of him. The instructor, turning to insults, ordered the boy to leave the cave. If he disobeyed, the instructor would be forced to take his life. Using his skills, the instructor punches the guy what his level is and what items he has. The instructor was sure it was trash. Han, unable to even use stealth. And from the looks of it, he showed up here for the students to collect items from them that they drop and resell them. Also, the instructor notices that Han had the rank of Full Hao, and if he can catch him, he can get the title of hero. The instructor stands up for his students. Han suggests he disperse peacefully as there are students here and they are not his target. The guy asks him to ignore him, let everyone go about their business and he will go about his. By slinging mud at him and not at all affectionate words, the instructor expresses his distrust of his words. The system gives a message that the safe zone in the dungeon is about to be removed. The instructor warns his students to stand behind him and not to worry about anything. As the students talk amongst themselves, they learn that their instructor is a member of the Holy Alliance and that they didn't expect any other outcome from him. Setting himself up for the inevitable confrontation, Han warns him that the answer will not be long in coming. Han gets a good moment to find out what the skills of a member of the Sacred Alliance are. Han decides to reiterate once again that he's here for the dungeon sweep. Grasping his sword, the instructor continued to question his words. The guy persistently repeated the purpose of his stay in the dungeon. After the counting of time is over, the instructor drew his sword. Immediately, he rushes to attack Han. As he flew, Han gave him a final warning. But it was pointless. The instructor was unbreakable. Pushing the guy against the rock, the instructor saw something was wrong with the guy. Our hero expected a stronger blow from the instructor. Han's behavior confused the instructor. He couldn't figure out what was wrong with the guy. Stepping back a little, the instructor asks for support, though the level is not high, but he has some strange technique. Our Lord had warned them several times, but no one wanted to hear him, so Han lashes out with an attack. He's just here to clean up the dungeon. If he could take down any monster with a single blow, then the instructor's sword was dust to him. Han points his fist straight at the instructor's sword. Well, from such a blow, the instructor's sword is cracking at the seams. The instructor catches the emergency and asks for support. Han's blow was so strong that the students standing next to him were thrown around by the wave, and the light from the blow was like the explosion of a nuclear bomb. Afterward, as if nothing had happened, Han put his hands in his pockets and went on his way. Khan struck fear into the remaining students. They saw him coming and thought they would suffer the same fate as the instructor. Not yet cooled down from the fight, the enraged Han asked the students who else would fight him. All of them made the right decision, and all of them retreated back. After waving goodbye to them, Khan disappears into the depths of the cave, leaving them with the wish that they would fulfill the task diligently and become outstanding people. After some time on the road, Han reflected on what had happened. He knew that even though he had status in the system, he wouldn't hurt the students. After a few minutes of deliberation, our boy arrives at the location. Han sees in front of him a defensive fortress, located right in the center of the dungeon. And in front of the fortress, there were skeleton soldiers. Han pondered what he should do first of all, but since he doesn't get any items from the monsters, he decided to destroy the defense tower at once. Without paying much attention to the monsters, he moved towards the tower. Rolling up his sleeves, the kid jumps to the tower itself. Immediately, a warning from the system flew in, telling the player to get out of the fortress attack zone and form a team. But our hero, there was no need for that. He saw the target and saw no obstacles. Approaching the tower, Han calculated that 10 strikes would be enough to destroy the tower. Han strikes the first blow, keeping account of the blows. And that's where his count stops, as Han makes a hole in the wall with his first strike. As Han takes his feet away from the wreck, he begins to doubt that it was a defensive tower. After all, it had crumbled like a house of cards. But on the other hand, he didn't care. He liked it so much that everything was going smoothly. The skeletons only swallowed the dust. After the tower, Han went on to clean up the dungeon. When the instructors arrived to help, they could only see a pack of skeletons walking in circles near the destroyed tower. In a dialogue among themselves, the instructors could not believe that a level 19 Chaosist was able to destroy a defensive tower with a lightweight. Not a single skeleton had been touched. It seemed to them that Han might have used some special item. But next, another surprise awaited them. The system announcement said that the Amantium dungeon had been completely cleared. Apparently, they had definitely not expected such speed from Han. A few seconds earlier, Han had been tired of so many skeletons, as they were everywhere, near every base. When he reached the final base, he saw a huge crystal in front of him under a protective shield, and it was also guarded by skeletons. Han hopes that this base will fall with one blow. Just like the previous bases, Han demolished the last defense with a single blow, but he'd hoped that at least this one would last longer. And here he gets it easy. After dropping the last base, Han immediately drops to his feet and hauls his ass out of the dungeon, leaving only the skeletons behind. He assumed he'd be chased by the other instructors. Upon completion, the system gives him level up points. He clearly enjoyed this low-level dungeon, as it was a one-hit kill. Leaving the cave, Han distributes the points he received and immediately brings himself up another level, and now he has reached level 20. As soon as he obtained the next level, Han immediately thought that he could now safely head into the Desert of Darkness. Panting, he still felt like he was being chased by the other instructors. After logging in, Han searched for information about them. It said that they could gather together from 1 to 5 people. Based on that, he hoped that all 5 of them would be at least level 50. At the very beginning of the dungeon, more than 10 people were waiting for Han, and the same students who stood behind the backs of their instructors. The girl, thinking that Han is not the only one who has cleared the dungeon, turns to him in plural, to which he begins to look around and whispered to Eder whether he has not rolled up his disguise, to which he received a negative answer. The girl says that she knows exactly what they are aiming for and hopes that there will be no pointless fighting in this place. Han thought carefully about what would happen if it came to a fight. Since there were not only instructors but also students in the dungeon, some of them might die again if it came to a fight, and catching helpless students was a total waste for Ju Hyuk. The girl asks Han to let the students go because he doesn't want to die a senseless death. As soon as the instructor finished speaking, Han just walked by them, saying that he understood what he was told and that since they were not going to attack, he reminded them that he was the first to ask them to leave him alone. Walking through the crowd of students and instructors, Ju Hyuk tells himself that his priority now is to go to the Desert of Darkness, and he can do the fighting later. Instructor Jurgil is thanked by another of the instructors for managing to avoid casualties. A little earlier she had been discussing with her other co-workers that, judging by the quick sweep, it seems very likely to them that Han was being helped by some forces, and he knows full well that they have a bunch of students to protect, so they need to talk him down and send him back. Returning to the picture so far, the girl discusses with the men that if it came to a battle, his forces, who were probably hiding somewhere, would be the first to attack the students. The man asks what kind of guy it was, and gets the assumption that the aura would be full Hao and most likely Rafendel. The man interrupts Jurgil and asks if Rafendel is level 50. The girl just assumes that he could have used cheats to skew his level. We are shown a high-class melee player above the 60th level, the player Hunter Rafendel, who found himself another victims. They in turn curse the guy, saying that a certain Li Yong is also following him, and they will definitely kill Hunter someday. To such senseless words, Rafendel said that if they recognized him, they should get out of the system as soon as possible. Hunter Rafendel, also known as the Full Hao player, was curious as to who was impersonating him, as he had seen comments on various forums about him being seen in several places at the same time. Han, coming to the village after a dungeon hunt, gathered a couple of elders and told them that this time they should go to a place where monsters are clustered in appreciable numbers. Ju Hyuk asks if there are any elders who specialize in extensive magic. One of the elders comes up to the guy and says that he is the best at broad magic. The guy says that in that case, he is his companion this time. Han remembered that his little sister Seiya's birthday was coming up, so this time he had to play the role of big brother and work hard to buy her a present and then an apartment. Being already in the Desert of Darkness in this place was not only Ju Hyuk, but also other players that were also waiting for the appearance of monsters. The system notified everyone in the area that the monsters would appear in 10 minutes. The boy asks Elder Zeta if everything is ready and gets a positive, but still frightening answer. Han repeats their plan, which is to destroy all players who dare to attack them, and before the high-level reinforcements arrive they need to destroy all the monsters and capture the blue stone. Once most of the players start running at Han, he says that he brought Zeta with him because she is good at the extensive magic he is asking her to demonstrate right now. Not for slow, for her overlord, Zeta let her magic enter. At this point, Zeta wished only one thing, that the future of the Lord prosper. Raising her palms to the top, the sky was covered in dark clouds, everything around her sparkled. Zeta summoned the God of Evil. Leaning over to it, she ordered it to crumble anyone who wouldn't stand in the Lord's way. The attackers were not particularly happy about the appearance of such a monster, all began to scatter. This picture pleased Han, and he decided to use his skills to help. From the intensity of the attacks, Han receives a system notification that the assassin's aura is getting darker. Han's sins are only getting worse. His fame is spreading at breakneck speed across the continent. It meant the rise of a new Death Star. What this could mean is that the rise of the Death Star occurs when a full HAL player raises his notoriety to a certain level or higher. During conflicts, the hero rank weakens the offensive and defensive capabilities of players with Death Star status. In addition, a player marked as a Death Star becomes less resistant to divine-type skills. Also, the resurrection time increases to 240 hours after death, and all sorts of penalties with 100% chance of all items falling out also apply. Han was a bit confused, as he didn't quite understand how this would affect him as the leader of the Heavenly Devils. The system messages continued to pour in, but Han didn't care about them at the moment. He had to help the Elder restore order. The last attacker managed to summon support by threatening that the head of the Sacred Alliance was his friend. Khan, in his favorite pose, hands in his pockets, and Elder Zeta, stood on the battlefield and assessed their order. But the silence and order after the battle did not last long, for more men appeared on the horizon, eager to cut off Han's head. Han looked at the approaching crowd. At that moment the system reported that the bulls had appeared. Han asked Zeta if she could deal with them or not. The Elder was already raring to fight, about to skin them. Gathering his strength, Han wasn't going to stand aside either. Han rushes into battle faster than the Elder. As he flew, Han gathered all his power into his fist. Already experienced, Han didn't want the monsters to fall with a single blow. Han hits the bull right between the eyes, crushing the skull inside into small pieces. Immediately, the system notifies him that the bull has been defeated. Khan makes 18,000 gold for one bull killed. But with his status, Khan could only take coins for a kill. No more items were dropped from the slain. Han wasn't too worried about the items not falling out, content with collecting only coins. But he didn't give up hope as he watched Zeta slaughter monsters, hoping that she would get items from the slain. And since this was the situation, Han should kill as many bulls as he could to get a lot of coins. The two hid in the bushes, covered with plaid, quietly watched the slaughter. They had never seen anything like it before, implying that Zeta and Han had automatic attacks. But one of them doubted it, for he was not the one with the sword, but the one who seemed to be a melee mage. One of the guys in the bushes saw the picture this way. He judged by the damage he inflicted on his opponent. He clearly specialized in melee attacks. The younger guy next to him thought he was a mage. After all, when they had previously attacked as a group, they couldn't even move the monsters. The other one thought that Han was level 50. Flying in the air, Zeta gathered powerful energy into her sword in the name of her lord. Summoning an all-encompassing lightning strike, she flew straight into the crowd towards the bulls. In doing so, she managed to impress Han with such a spectacle, and for free. Han praises her for a job well done. The boy orders Zeta to collect all the blue stones. Immediately, taking a low start, Zeta rushes to collect. Within seconds, 2 bags of stones are in Han's hands. Han didn't expect such speed from her. In this fight, she managed to impress him with more than just speed. The system gives Han a warning that the main monster is being summoned. Looking back, Han sees a column of smoke and an eerie roar in the distance. Han thinks it's time for them to get out of here. Those who were hiding in the bushes couldn't believe their eyes either, assuming it was a bull calf. And those 2 in the bushes were right. From the whole bull crowd, he stood out too much. It was the Black Bull King. Han shared with the Elder that this was the first time he had seen such a creature. The lad orders Zeta to clean up the small scum and bring the fallen items with him. Preparing for the fight, Han assumed that this boss would be stronger than his little bulls. And if it was a territory boss, then at least one pack containing 20 blue stones would fall out of it. Han was certainly hoping that this bull wouldn't fall the first time, then he could give Zeta a chance to kill it. Zeta approaches Han and informs him in his ear that someone with tremendous strength is approaching. Han sees another crowd on the battlefield past the bulls. He was not surprised by this crowd, because sooner or later they were bound to show up. Han does not dare to enter the battle, as he could add to his own troubles. Han wasn't too worried about it, because he realized that he was still weak at the moment. He knew that one day he would be able to regain his former glory as a heavenly devil. Han and Zeta decided to take their feet in their hands and run while they still had the chance. He was a little upset about the blue stone pack, though. Exiting the game, Han sat counting his progress for that moment of the game. He calculated that during the game he was able to level up +2 and had collected 11 blue stones with Zeta's help. Han sat in his room and tried to find any information about the bull boss. After all, the Black Bull King was a monster that had never been mentioned. The guy was already starting to sin his luck, which was his -99 position. He wasn't quite sure how to regard such a sign, good or bad. Han thought about the fact that if the Black Bull King had been able to withstand his blow, he would already have a bag of blue stones in his pocket. Going to the forum, he saw a post that interested him, asking if the difficulty in the hunting grounds had been increased without notice. Going to the post, it said that the player had gone to the Amantium dungeon, but the difficulty was insanely high. Also, there suddenly appeared black skeleton soldiers, but it seems that even for a group of players with level 19 it was not possible to deal with them, so what about the students? Another post said that suddenly a black giant bear had appeared in a giant bear habitat. Zhu Heck, reading this, wondered if these weren't the same places he had been before. He hoped that these all incidents didn't happen because of him. A new post appeared in front of the guy's eyes and it talked about that very royal bull in the desert of darkness. Going in, one of the players wrote that today Hayasid had single-handedly destroyed all the bull monsters and retreated at the sight of the Black Bull King. Later, the advanced players who came to catch Hayasid destroyed the Black Bull King, and 3 packs of blue stones with 30 pieces each fell out of it. Khan was furious when he saw that 3 packs of 30 pieces of stones and 90 pieces of blue stones totaling almost 450 million gold coins were right in front of him, but he decided to leave. Adding up all of today's loot, he calculated that from the 11 blue stones he had mined, he had gotten 50,500,000 gold coins. The food cost for 3 days for the Heavenly Devil Village is approximately 36 million gold coins. On top of that, there is also the commission for money exchange, taxes, etc. also applies. In the end, the boy is left with only 15 million won. With that amount of money, it wouldn't be hard to buy a birthday present for his little sister Saya or provide food. But he thinks that with such a paltry balance, he'll never be able to buy a house or a car. Since he has a low actual level, there are many areas he can't visit and skills are blocked accordingly, with fines added on top of that. This leaves him with no choice but to level up. The men finished his report, from which the director was interested in the Black Bull. The men confirmed that it was a monster whose overall characteristics had increased significantly. Alliance Director Young Woo-hyun said that this bull was really not like an average monster. He ordered to continue hunting as before and increase the number of people if necessary. In case of an accident, they had many ordinary players who could be easily replaced. The men said that everything would be done, to which the director added an errand about a Chaosite who was allegedly rampaging in the Desert of Darkness and had greatly harmed the members of their alliance. He asked the men to make sure it was really Rafendel and try to gather as much information about him as possible.